On August 18, 1991, Mikhail Gorbachev, the president of the Soviet Union, was at a summer resort on the Crimean Peninsula, overlooking the Black Sea. While relaxing, he was surprised by the sudden loss of communications and the absence of news from Moscow. At that time, the forces of Moscow's intelligence, under the orders of its chief, Vladimir Kryuchkov, were mobilizing to announce a coup against President Gorbachev. Gorbachev had decided to reduce the power of Russian intelligence and impose strict oversight on the systems and activities of the KGB. When you first hear that name, the first thing that comes to mind is James Bond movies and the global spy wars between Russia and America, or even Egyptian intelligence and Mossad. But let me tell you that all the security intelligence agencies currently existing in the world are nothing compared to the vast ocean of the KGB, which the head of the Soviet Union himself wanted to stop. Is it the history of the KGB and how it became the strongest intelligence agency in the world that we will learn about in today's video? If you think that the KGB was the first implementation of the idea of an intelligence security apparatus in Russia, that is mistaken. The idea of political security and intelligence in Russia began centuries ago, specifically in 1825, when Nicholas I became the Tsar of Russia. Nicholas was so hated by the Russian people that they cursed the very day he assumed power. A few days after his accession, a major uprising and demonstrations took place in which more than 3,000 officers from the Russian Imperial Army, in addition to many citizens, protested against Nicholas's assumption of power. Because of that uprising, Nicholas formed a vast network of spies and informers with the help of the draconian police, called the Third Department of the Imperial Council. This network was the first system of political internal security police in Russia and throughout Europe. And its mission was to collect information in order to protect the state and thwart uprisings, as happened in the December Revolution. It managed to preempt the whole world in establishing the first intelligence agency in Europe, a body that evolved and changed over time until it became the KGB, though it went through many stages. Let's see them together. In 1917, the Bolshevik Revolution erupted in Russia under the leadership of Vladimir Lenin, and the Great Soviet Union was established. Due to the large number of opponents to the revolution from various classes, Lenin established a political police force called the Extraordinary Commission for all of Russia to combat the counter-revolution and sabotage. Its name was abbreviated as Cheka. This agency was created to be the sword and shield of the revolution. It was a small, exceptional agency whose goal was to investigate and deal with any threat to Lenin's new regime. He did not supervise the group himself but chose another person to lead it, Felix Dzerzhinsky. In the beginning, as mentioned, Cheka was a small organization with very limited operations. In early 1918, it had only 120 agents. However, with the growth of opposition during that same year and the increase in anti-Bolshevik activities, coupled with the onset of the Civil War to the extent of an attempted assassination of Lenin, everything changed. Dzerzhinsky began recruiting thousands of new agents. The organization's scope and rhetoric expanded, operating without any legal constraints, investigations, arrests, executions, and spontaneous campaigns. In 1922, Cheka was replaced by another institution, the Joint Political Directorate, also known as the GPU. Keep in mind that the change was merely a change in name to improve its harsh image that had spread in previous years. Even the head of the GPU was Dzerzhinsky again. Nevertheless, its number of agents was enormous, and they were spread throughout the state in the literal sense: factories, administrative offices, streets, even outside the Soviet Union. GPU agents operated in foreign countries to track and abduct opponents of the Soviet Union. They were everywhere: factories, administrative offices, streets, even outside the Soviet Union. But in 1934, the GPU was merged into another institution called the NKVD, which stands for the People's Commissariat for Internal Affairs. This became the weapon used by Stalin in the Great Purge, through a series of repression and political persecution campaigns that lasted from 1936 until March 1938. In 1938, after all opponents of the regime, regardless of whether they lived in Russia or abroad, had been completely eliminated, Stalin took full responsibility and announced that the internal enemies had been eradicated. Later, he even criticized the NKVD for carrying out mass executions, ordering the execution of the heads of the apparatus during the Purge campaign, namely Genrikh Yagoda and Nikolai Yezhov. In 1938, Stalin summoned Lavrentiy Beria to become the head of the NKVD. Beria, who had been the head of the GPU in Georgia and was responsible for the Great Purge in Georgia, was one of the powerful and influential figures in the Soviet Union, to the extent that he took over the apparatus even after Stalin's death. Even in 1943, the name of the apparatus was changed from NKVD to NKGB, which functioned as the People's Commissariat for State Security. This move separated state security functions from internal affairs. Later, in 1946, the NKVD became the Ministry of Internal Affairs (MVD), and the KGB became the Ministry of State Security (MGB). Both ministries were under the supervision of Lavrentiy Beria. Beria was not only responsible for the KGB but was also the Minister of Internal Affairs of the country and in charge of managing the nuclear bomb dossier for the Soviet Union. Beria and the intelligence apparatus played a very significant role far beyond repression and persecution, imprisoning a large number of opponents and sending them to gulag camps. In addition, at the time of the war with Germany, the apparatus succeeded in penetrating British intelligence services MI6 and the anti-espionage service MI5, which enabled them to transfer more than 200,000 secret files from Britain to the Soviet Union. Russian intelligence was able to foil many of Stalin's assassination attempts and even completely penetrate Germany during World War II in the Red Orchestra operation. There were Russian spies from the intelligence apparatus who reached important positions in Germany itself, whether in the Ministry of Armaments, the German government, or the German Foreign Ministry. Even after the end of World War II, Russian intelligence managed to bring many German scientists to the Soviet Union so that they could be utilized in its nuclear program. Moreover, Beria sent a team to America to spy on its nuclear program, and this occurred during the Cold War between Russia and America, which immediately followed World War II. Russian intelligence succeeded in obtaining the complete plan for implementing the nuclear bomb and stole all its secrets. In 1953, after Stalin's death, Beria attempted to seize power. It is said that Beria was actually responsible for Stalin's death, because after Stalin's last dinner at Beria's house, a severe stroke struck him, and he died 4 days later. However, Beria's plan did not succeed due to the new Soviet leader, Nikita Khrushchev, who stopped the Great Purge operations and succeeded in seizing the Soviet parliament. Khrushchev then put Beria on trial, executed him, and after assuming power, he launched a series of major trials against the chief of staff and officials in the Russian intelligence apparatus MGB, executing most of them. After that, the release of millions of political prisoners and opponents of Stalin from the Gulag detention camps began. Following Beria's execution, in 1954, the police and political security sectors were divided into two ministries. The first remained the Ministry of Internal Affairs, responsible for internal state affairs from the very beginning, and the second became the Ministry of State Security MGB, responsible for state security. Then, under the shield and scepter of communism, the Russian intelligence apparatus, the KGB, emerged under the leadership of Ivan Serov. Their first task was to track down and eliminate all of Beria's followers. The roles of the KGB continued, just like those of all previous intelligence agencies, pursuing and arresting opponents. During its heyday, the KGB reached the zenith of Russian intelligence, exerting enormous control both inside the country and even abroad, and it became the largest intelligence system in the entire world. Its mission was not limited only to pursuing domestic opponents, but it was also the largest organization with spies stationed outside the country, in every nation. Moreover, while KGB spies were present throughout the world, no spies from global intelligence agencies were found inside the Soviet Union because the KGB was capable of exposing and arresting them. And during the Cold War, on more than one occasion, the KGB outplayed the American intelligence agency, the CIA. Since KGB agents were selected very precisely to be the best, most patriotic, and smartest, They infiltrated countries and their political systems with ease, being planted professionally in America as businessmen and politicians. Due to the might of the KGB, they even attempted to buy entire banks in America. All this was in addition to their successes in stealing scientific research and military secrets, and of course we all know the theft of technology as when Russian intelligence stole the method of constructing the hydrogen bomb from America and even the production of satellites and space rockets. In Russia, they managed to transfer the manufacturing methods from America without having to study them. The KGB was composed of a very large number of departments and directorates, with each individual having a specific task performed to perfection. Departments for foreign espionage, departments for internal surveillance, a directorate of operations and technology, and many laboratories specializing in toxins, narcotics, and scientific research. All this, along with the KGB's constant main approach of protecting the Communist Party, spreading communist principles, and defending them, continued until 1985. After Mikhail Gorbachev became the head of the Soviet Union, he decided to implement reforms related to foreign policies. He wanted to achieve peace between Russia and the Western countries and establish a new system based on trust. So, he began to ease international tensions and the conflicts of the Cold War. Not only that, Gorbachev started to reduce the powers of the KGB within Russia, limiting its role to foreign policies. While at the same time, the KGB was being transformed into more than one apparatus, including the Federal Security Service, whose head was Vladimir Putin, the current president of Russia. Due to the vast powers that the Soviet Union's Council had granted to the President and the Parliament, a reaction from the KGB was inevitable. Here, we return again to our story in 1991, specifically on August 18th, when he was surprised by Moscow while spending his summer vacation on the Crimean Peninsula. At that time, there were coup attempts led by the head of the KGB, Vladimir Kryuchkov. Yeltsin, then president of the Russian Federation, declared a general strike and civil disobedience, considering the military coup legal. He headed toward the parliament building where thousands of people stood by him and declared civil disobedience so that they could move to Moscow and the rest of the Russian cities. This prompted the largest force of the KGB to withdraw its forces on August 21, 1991. Subsequently, the coup leaders were arrested: Kryuchkov, the head of the KGB, Dmitry Yuzov, the Minister of Defense, Valentin Pavlov, the Prime Minister, and even the Vice President. Gorbachev's deputy, Gennady Yeniev. After Gorbachev returned on the following day, he announced his resignation as head of the Communist Party.